I always thought I was a good uncle. For years, I've been the reliable babysitter for my brother Mark's 3 kids, while he and my sister-in-law Natalie handled their busy lives. I never asked for anything in return because that's what family does for each other. Then one day after a minor accident where my nephew got a small bump on his head, Natalie completely overreacted and called the police on me claiming child endangerment. I was investigated like a criminal for making a reasonable parenting decision. After that betrayal, I refused to babysit anymore. And now her perfectly arranged life is crumbling without my free help. If you've ever had your kindness thrown back in your face, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Trust me, seeing how karma unfolded in my situation might give you some satisfaction. My brother Mark and I have always been close despite the 4-year age gap between us. Growing up, he was my protector, my guide, and eventually my best friend. When he met Natalie at a friend's wedding 8 years ago, I was genuinely happy for him. She was smart, ambitious, and seemed to make him happy. They dated for about a year before getting engaged, and I stood proudly as his best man when they married. In the beginning, my relationship with Natalie was good. We weren't best friends or anything, but we got along well at family gatherings and occasional dinners. When they announced they were expecting their first child, Tommy, everyone was thrilled. I remember Mark pulling me aside at their gender reveal party, gripping my shoulder and saying, "I want you to be a big part of this kid's life, Jarvis. You're going to be the cool uncle." And I took that role seriously. When Tommy was born, I was at the hospital within hours, bearing a giant teddy bear and eager to meet my nephew. 2 years later, Emma joined the family, followed by little Sam 3 years after that. I loved those kids fiercely from day one, and made a point to be present for birthdays, school events, and ordinary weekends. My own life situation made it easy for me to help out. At 32, I'm still single, though not for lack of trying. I work as an IT specialist for a software company that allows flexible work-from-home options. My schedule is predictable, and I have a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from Mark and Natalie's house. When they first asked if I could watch Tommy for an evening so they could have a date night, I agreed without hesitation. That occasional favor gradually evolved into a regular arrangement. By the time little Sam was born, I was babysitting about 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes overnight when they had events or wanted a weekend getaway. I created a small play area in my spare bedroom, kept toys and clothes for each child, and learned all their routines, preferences, and needs. Looking back, there were early warning signs about Natalie that I chose to ignore. She was always particular about how things should be done, which was understandable for a mother, but her rules became increasingly specific and rigid over time. The kids could only have certain snacks at certain times. Screen time was measured down to the minute. Bedtime routines had to be followed in exact sequence. Tommy needs the blue cup, not the red one. Emma's hair has to be braided before bed or it tangles. Sam will only fall asleep if you read "Goodnight Moon" exactly twice, no more, no less. The instructions became longer and more detailed with each visit. I always did my best to respect her parenting choices, even when I thought they were a bit much. They weren't my kids after all. If Natalie wanted things done a certain way, that was her prerogative as their mother. Mark would sometimes roll his eyes behind her back when she launched into her detailed instructions. But he supported her system, and so did I. About 2 years ago, Natalie decided to pursue a career in real estate. She'd been a stay-at-home mom since Tommy was born, but with Sam starting preschool, she wanted to get back into the workforce. This meant my babysitting duties increased significantly. There were open houses on weekends, client meetings in the evenings, and training sessions during the week. Soon I was watching the kids almost every other day. Mark would occasionally suggest they should pay me, but I always refused. That's what family does for each other, I'd say. And I meant it. I loved spending time with my niece and nephews, and I was happy to help my brother and his wife build their lives. Besides, I figured they'd do the same for me someday when I had a family of my own. As Natalie's real estate career began to take off, I noticed a subtle shift in her attitude. What had once been requests became expectations. The advance notice for babysitting got shorter and shorter. "Can you take the kids tomorrow?" became, "I'm dropping the kids off at 4. My agreement was assumed rather than asked for. Still, I adapted. I rearranged my work schedule to accommodate their needs. I postponed dates and declined social invitations. I was the reliable uncle, the dependable brother, the free childcare provider that made their busy lives possible. The day before the incident, Natalie had called asking if I could watch the kids the next afternoon. She had an important house showing that could lead to a significant commission. Of course I agreed. The next day she dropped them off in a rush, barely taking time to give me the usual reminders before hurrying out the door. It was a beautiful spring day, so after lunch, I took the kids to the park near my apartment. Tommy, now 7, loved the monkey bars. Emma, 5, preferred the swings. And 3-year-old Sam was content in the sandbox with his toy trucks. I watched them carefully, as I always did, moving between them to push Emma on the swing, admire Sam's sandcastles, and spot Tommy as he navigated the playground equipment. Little did I know that this ordinary day would completely change my relationship with my brother's family forever. The accident happened so quickly. Tommy had been safely climbing across the monkey bars for almost 15 minutes, something he'd done countless times before. I was helping Sam build a sandcastle just a few feet away, keeping an eye on all 3 kids as they played. One moment Tommy was swinging confidently from bar to bar, and the next, his hand slipped. He fell about 4 feet, landing on his side in the mulch beneath the equipment. I was at his side instantly. He was crying more from shock than pain, it seemed. I checked him carefully for injuries, finding only a small bump forming on his forehead where he must have bumped against one of the bars during the fall. No cuts, no blood, no signs of anything broken. I applied a cold water bottle from our cooler to the bump and comforted him until the tears subsided. "Does anything hurt besides your head, buddy?" I asked carefully, moving his limbs to check for less obvious injuries. "No, just my head a little," he sniffled. I knew the protocol for head injuries. I checked his pupils, which were normal and equal. I asked him simple questions to ensure he was coherent. I had him follow my finger with his eyes. Everything indicated a minor bump, without concussion. Still, I kept a close watch on him for the rest of the afternoon, waking him when he took his usual nap to make sure he was responsive, and checking in regularly to see if he developed any concerning symptoms. By the time Natalie returned at 6 o'clock, Tommy was perfectly fine. The bump had barely raised and was already starting to fade. He was playing video games with his usual enthusiasm when his mother walked in. "How was everyone today?" Natalie asked, distracted as she checked messages on her phone. "Great day," I replied. "We went to the park, had mac and cheese for lunch, and—" "What's that on Tommy's head?" she interrupted, suddenly focusing intensely on her son. Before I could fully explain, she was examining the small bump, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. "He had a small fall from the monkey bars," I explained. "It's just a little bump." I monitored him closely, and there's been no sign of concussion or— "You let him fall. Why wasn't he being supervised?" Natalie's voice rose sharply. "I was right there, Natalie. Kids fall sometimes. It's part of playing." I checked him thoroughly. "And did you take him to urgent care? Did a doctor see this?" she demanded. "No, because it wasn't necessary. I'm certified in first aid and there were no concerning symptoms that warranted medical attention." Natalie's face flushed with anger. "You don't get to make that call. He could have a concussion or internal bleeding. I can't believe you would be so negligent." I was stunned by her reaction. The bump was so minor that it was barely visible anymore. Tommy himself looked confused by his mother's outburst. "Mom, I'm fine," he tried to assure her. Uncle Jarvis put cold on it right away and asked me lots of questions to make sure I was okay. But Natalie wasn't listening. She gathered the kids' belongings with sharp, angry movements, instructing them to get their shoes on immediately. As she herded them toward the door, she turned to me with a cold expression I'd never seen before. "I trusted you with my children, Jarvis. I won't make that mistake again." They left abruptly, leaving me bewildered by the extreme overreaction. I texted Mark afterward, explaining what had happened and expressing concern about Natalie's response. He didn't reply. Around 9 that night, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice tight with tension. "Jarvis, we need to talk." Natalie took Tommy to the emergency room. "Is he okay?" I asked, immediately concerned, despite knowing the bump had been minor. "He's fine. The doctor said it was nothing to worry about, just like you thought." He paused and I could hear him take a deep breath. "But Jarvis, Natalie called the police. She filed a report for child endangerment against you." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? "She told them you left the kids unsupervised at the park and that Tommy could have been seriously injured. The police are probably going to contact you for questioning." I couldn't process what I was hearing. Child endangerment. For a bump that the doctor had confirmed was nothing to worry about, Mark. You know that's not what happened. I was right there. I would never leave the kids unsupervised. I know, he said quietly. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was so worked up. She said she had to do it for the kids' safety. The next day, 2 police officers showed up at my apartment. They questioned me for over an hour about the incident, my childcare routines, and my relationship with the children. It was humiliating and terrifying. Thankfully, my account was consistent, my first aid certification was current, and the officers ultimately determined there had been no negligence. "These things happen with kids," one officer told me sympathetically. "Sounds like you did everything right." The case was closed without charges, but the damage was done. I felt violated, betrayed by the woman I had helped countless times over the years. The thought that I would ever endanger those children whom I loved as if they were my own was so offensive I could barely process it. Mark called again that evening, clearly uncomfortable. "Natalie wants to talk to you," he said. "She realizes she might have overreacted." When she came on the line, her apology was perfunctory at best. "I was just being protective of my child," she said, her tone suggesting she was still in the right. "As a mother, my instinct is to make sure my kids are safe. Maybe I took it too far, but that's just maternal instinct." There was no acknowledgement of the seriousness of what she'd done, the way she'd questioned my character and exposed me to legal scrutiny. No recognition of how her actions might affect our relationship going forward. "I understand you were concerned," I replied carefully. "But calling the police was extreme, Natalie. You could have talked to me. You could have asked questions before jumping to the worst conclusion." "Well, it's over now," she said dismissively. "So we're good, right? Because I have a big client meeting on Thursday, and I'll need you to take the kids from 2 until about 7. That was when I made my decision. No, we're not good. And I won't be babysitting the kids anymore." There was a shocked silence on the line. "What do you mean?" "I mean that after being accused of endangering children I love after having police question me like a criminal, I'm not comfortable putting myself in that position again." "You can't be serious," she scoffed. "It was one misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that involved calling the authorities on me. I'm sorry, but my decision is final." The family fallout was immediate and messy. Mark called me repeatedly, caught in the middle and trying to make peace. Extended family members took sides. My parents thought I should forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. Natalie's parents, unsurprisingly, supported their daughter's actions as reasonable caution. Through it all, I remained firm. I would still see the kids at family gatherings. I would still be their loving uncle. But I would not provide childcare anymore. Not after having my trustworthiness so fundamentally questioned. Natalie, for her part, seemed to think my boundary was temporary, a fit of pique that would pass once I calmed down. "He'll come around," I overheard her telling Mark on the phone. "He loves the kids too much to stay away." She had no idea how serious I was or what the consequences of her actions would be. The first real test of my boundary came just 5 days after I'd stated my position. My phone rang at 7:30 in the morning. It was Natalie. "Jarvis, I have an emergency," she said, her voice urgent. "My showing got moved up to 9 o'clock and Mark has an important meeting he can't reschedule. I need you to watch the kids. I can drop them off in 20 minutes. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied calmly. "But as I told you, I'm no longer available for childcare." There was a pause, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "This is ridiculous. It's an emergency. Poor planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I'm sure there are drop-in daycare centers or babysitting services you could call. In 20 minutes, be realistic. Her tone shifted from demanding to pleading. Please, Jarvis. This client could mean a huge commission. I'll make it up to you. It's not about making it up to me. It's about respect and trust, both of which were broken when you called the police on me. I'm not available to babysit anymore. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. I hung up, my heart pounding, but feeling stronger for having maintained my boundary. Mark called 10 minutes later, his voice tight with stress. Man, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But we're in a bind here. Can you just help out this once I'm sorry, Mark? I love you and the kids, but no. Actions have consequences. Natalie made her choice when she decided I was a danger to her children. Now she gets to live with that decision. Mark sighed heavily. This puts me in an impossible position. You know that, right? I didn't create this position. I reminded him gently. And it's not impossible. There are other childcare options. They just aren't as convenient or free as I was. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effects of my decision became increasingly apparent. Natalie had to cancel several house showings when she couldn't find childcare on short notice. She missed an important training session for new realtors in her agency. She had to pay premium rates for last-minute babysitters, cutting into her commission earnings. Her carefully constructed schedule was falling apart without my reliable availability. Mark mentioned casually during a phone call that Natalie's broker had expressed concern about her dependability. 3 canceled appointments in 2 weeks doesn't look good, he said, especially when clients have arranged their schedules to see properties. I felt a twinge of guilt, but reminded myself that this wasn't my problem to solve. Natalie was an adult who had made a serious accusation against me. The current situation was simply the natural consequence of that action. As her frustration grew, Natalie escalated her efforts to change my mind. She sent her mother to talk to me, appealing to my better nature. Those children miss their uncle, she insisted, though I knew from Mark that they saw me regularly at family dinners. Natalie made one mistake. Are you going to punish everyone forever? Next came emotional appeals through the children. Tommy called me, clearly coached, to tell me how much he missed our special uncle time and ask when I would babysit again. It broke my heart to hear him being used as a pawn, but I gently explained that I still loved spending time with him and would see him that weekend at Grandma's house. Natalie took to social media, posting vague complaints about unsupportive family and the childcare crisis for working mothers. Mutual friends who knew the situation texted me about it, most supporting my position once they understood what had happened. Mark, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated with his wife. She refuses to acknowledge how serious what she did was, he confided during a brother lunch we managed to arrange. She just keeps saying you're being petty and punishing her for being a protective mom. It's not about punishment, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. It's about protecting myself. If she genuinely understood what she did wrong and showed real remorse, maybe we could talk about rebuilding trust, but she still thinks she was justified. The situation reached a breaking point about 6 weeks after the incident. I was working from home when my doorbell rang insistently. When I opened it, I found Natalie standing there with all 3 kids and their backpacks. I have a closing in 30 minutes, she announced, already turning to leave. I'll be back by 6. There's snacks in Sam's bag. I blocked the doorway. Natalie, no. I've been clear about this. I'm not babysitting anymore. She had the audacity to look shocked. You can't just refuse. They're your family. Yes, they are, and I love them. But I'm not providing childcare for you anymore. Not after what you did. That was weeks ago. How long are you going to hold a grudge? This isn't a grudge. It's a boundary. There's a difference. She tried to usher the children past me into the apartment. I gently but firmly stopped them, kneeling down to their level. I'm sorry, guys, but you can't stay with me today. Your mom needs to take you with her or find another babysitter. Emma looked confused. But why don't you want to play with us? My heart ached. I always want to play with you. But not like this. Not when your mom doesn't ask me properly or respect my decision. Natalie was furious now. So you'll punish the children because you're mad at me. Real mature, Jarvis. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm holding a boundary that I've been clear about for weeks. You're the one who brought the children here knowing I would say no. If anyone is using them as pawns, it's you. Our raised voices must have alerted neighbors because Mark called me while Natalie was still arguing on my doorstep. He'd apparently been contacted by someone in my building who knew us. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said, sounding exhausted. Don't let her leave the kids. When he arrived, he witnessed Natalie still trying to convince me, growing increasingly desperate and unreasonable in her arguments. For the first time, he saw the full extent of her entitlement and manipulation. Enough, Natalie, he finally interrupted. Jarvis has been clear from the beginning. You can't force him to watch the kids. We'll have to figure something else out. Like what she snapped. Cancel the closing, lose the commission. How are we supposed to pay for summer camp and Emma's dance classes if I can't work? Mark looked at her steadily. Maybe it's time we discussed how we handled childcare before you had a free on-call babysitter. Because this isn't working. That weekend, Mark's parents hosted a family dinner and requested everyone's presence to clear the air. What began as an attempt at mediation quickly revealed the deeper issues at play. With extended family as witnesses, I calmly explained my position again, detailing exactly what had happened and why I felt the need to establish this boundary. I was accused of endangering children I love, I concluded. The police were called to investigate me over a minor accident that every parent and caregiver has experienced. The trust is broken, and I need to protect myself. Natalie attempted to defend her actions, but her arguments rang hollow even to her supporters. I was just being a concerned mother, she insisted. Any parent would have done the same. Would they? My mother asked gently. Would you have called the police if Mark had been watching the children and the same accident happened? Natalie's hesitation was telling. That's different. He's their father. And Jarvis's family, who has watched your children hundreds of times without incident, my father pointed out. One minor bump doesn't erase years of reliable care. As the conversation continued, Mark finally spoke up definitively. I love my wife, but she was wrong to call the police. And Jarvis has every right to stop babysitting after that. We need to respect his decision and find other solutions. Natalie looked around the room, realizing she had lost the family's sympathy. With a choked sound of frustration, she grabbed her purse and left, leaving Mark with the children. The family discussion continued without her shifting to practical matters of how to support Mark with childcare needs without putting everything on me. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly heard and validated. In the weeks following the family intervention, a palpable shift occurred in our family dynamic. Mark reported that he and Natalie had been having serious conversations about entitlement, respect, and appreciation. Their marriage was strained, but in many ways, this crisis had forced them to address underlying issues they had ignored for too long. Natalie's initial reaction was predictable: anger, defensiveness, and attempts to paint herself as the victim. She avoided family gatherings for 2 consecutive weekends, sending Mark and the children alone. Meanwhile, her professional life continued to suffer. Without reliable childcare, she missed opportunities and gained a reputation for cancellations among clients and colleagues. About 3 weeks after the family dinner, I received a text from Natalie asking if we could meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. Curious but cautious, I agreed. She looked tired when she arrived at the cafe. The polished appearance she typically maintained somewhat diminished. After ordering our drinks, she got straight to the point. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began. And some therapy, she added with a small, self-deprecating smile. I realize now that I completely overreacted about Tommy's accident. I nodded, but remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The thing is, she went on, I think I've been taking you for granted for a long time. You were always so willing to help that I stopped seeing it as a favor and started seeing it as an obligation. When Tommy got hurt, I lashed out because it was easier than admitting I'd become dependent on your help. Her words surprised me with their insight. That's actually very perceptive, I acknowledged. Calling the police was inexcusable. She continued, her voice catching slightly. I knew even while I was doing it that it was an overreaction, but I was so caught up in proving I was a good mother that I couldn't back down. I'm truly sorry, Jarvis. Not just because I need your help, though I do, but because I hurt someone who has been nothing but kind to our family. For the first time, her apology felt genuine. There was no manipulation, no expectation, just honest regret. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened. I don't expect you to start babysitting again, she added quickly. I understand why you set that boundary and I respect it. I just wanted you to know that I see now how wrong I was. That conversation marked the beginning of my own healing process. The anger I'd been carrying began to dissipate, replaced by a new awareness of my own patterns. I realized that I had always been a people pleaser, often at the expense of my own needs. This incident had forced me to examine that tendency and establish healthier boundaries, not just with Natalie, but in other relationships as well. I started saying no to requests that didn't serve me, whether from family, friends, or colleagues. I became more intentional about how I spent my time and energy, and I found that most people respected these boundaries once I clearly established them. My relationship with Mark strengthened through this challenge. He apologized for not standing up for me sooner and acknowledged his role in enabling Natalie's behavior. We resumed our regular brothers' nights out, carefully avoiding childcare as a topic at first, but eventually reaching a place where we could discuss family matters openly again. 2 months after our coffee meeting, Natalie approached me at a family birthday celebration. The kids really miss their special time with you, she said. No pressure at all, but if you ever wanted to spend an afternoon with them, it would mean the world to them. And to me, she added sincerely. I had been thinking about this possibility. I might be open to occasional visits, I said cautiously. Not regular childcare, but maybe a monthly uncle day. Her face lit up. They would love that. Whatever terms you're comfortable with. We started small, a Saturday afternoon at the zoo, just me and the kids. No rushing off to work for Natalie, no assumptions about my availability. I picked them up at an agreed time and returned them as promised. Tommy talked excitedly about school, Emma showed me her new dance moves, and little Sam had apparently appointed himself my special assistant, holding my hand and helping me read the animal information signs. It felt good to reconnect with them, to see their faces light up and hear their laughter. But it also felt different, healthier, more balanced on my terms. Over time, our family found a new equilibrium. Mark and Natalie hired a part-time nanny and established a relationship with a reliable teenage babysitter for evenings. They adjusted their work schedules to tag-team childcare responsibilities more equitably. Natalie's career stabilized once she had dependable childcare arrangements, though she had to work to rebuild her professional reputation. Occasionally, when their childcare plans fell through, they would call me, but now it was always with advance notice, a genuine request, rather than an expectation, and with profuse thanks afterward. I sometimes said yes, sometimes no, based on my own schedule and needs, and either answer was respected. Looking back a year later, I can see how this painful experience ultimately led to healthier relationships all around. Standing firm on my boundaries was difficult but necessary. It forced everyone, myself included, to recognize patterns that weren't serving us and to make meaningful changes. I still believe in helping family. I still love my niece and nephews fiercely. But I've learned that true family support doesn't mean being a doormat or allowing yourself to be taken for granted. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to establish clear boundaries and hold people accountable for their actions. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? How did you handle it? And what was the outcome? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else facing a similar situation. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. And if you know someone struggling with family boundaries, share this video with them as a reminder that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even with the people you love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity in all your relationships.